In this video, we will be completing Chapter 1 of the Ashley Book of Knots with entries 103 through 148. These entries deal with materials for tying rope and how to work with these materials. It should be again noted that Ashley's book was published in 1944, so the material discussed is what was available and used during that time. Any flexible material can be used to tie a knot, but Ashley says, unless specified, rope and cord will be the materials considered in this book. Ashley says the term rope ordinarily applies to twisted vegetable fiber, and the first step in making this type of rope is to spin or twist a number of fibers together. This twisting together of fibers results in yarn or thread. In different applications, yarn and thread wouldn't be the same, but in rope making they are. Sewing thread may be 2, 3, or more small yarns twisted together. Sailmaker's sewing thread is made up of a number of loose twisted cotton or linen yarns. Going back to the components of a rope, we have the yarn, and then a strand, which is 2 or more yarns or threads twisted together, generally left-handed. Rope is 3 or more left-handed strands twisted together right-handed, which is called plain-laid rope. Large plain-laid rope, generally over 5 inches in circumference, is called Hawser rope. Cable or cable-laid rope is 3 plain or Hawser-laid ropes laid up together left-handed. Right-handed four-strand rope is noted by Ashley as being used for lanyards, bucket bales, man ropes, and sometimes for the running rigging of yachts. Right-handed rope with 4 strands and a center core or heart is called Shroud-Laid Rope, and was used for standing rigging before the use of wire rope. The heart of Shroud-Laid Rope is plain-laid rope, about half the size of one of the strands. Right-handed rope with a heart is called Six-Strand Rope. This rope was referred to as limber rope, as it was used to clear the limbers, which are drains on a ship, when they became clogged. Ashley notes that in his day, 6-strand rope with wire cores in each strand was made for mooring cable and buoy ropes for small boats. In backhanded or reverse-laid rope, the yarns and strands are both right-handed. It may be either 3 or 4 strand and is more pliant than plain-laid rope and less likely to kink when new. Ashley notes that it doesn't wear well, is difficult to splice, and takes up moisture readily. He also says that it was used in the Navy for gun tackle and braces, but in his day this type of lay and cotton rope was sometimes used for yacht running rigging. In left-handed or left-laid rope, the yarns are left-handed, the strands are right-handed, and the rope is left-handed, which is the direct opposite of right-handed rope. In rope making, if we are strictly speaking, yarns are spun, strands are formed, ropes are laid, and cables are closed. Soft-laid, slack-laid, or long-laid rope handles easily, does not kink, and is strongest. An example of a soft-laid rope that Ashley gives is whale line, which was used for whaling. Hard-laid or short-laid rope is noted by Ashley as giving better surface wear and is stiffer but also weaker. Lariat rope is very hard-laid and is used for lassoing cattle. Rope that is stretched so it has lost its thickness and much of its twist is called long-jawed. Ends of a rope that have swelled and weathered are called the Gouty Ends. The remaining entries of Chapter 1 deal with working with rope and knot tying materials. Ashley notes that a good practical way to break a new stiff rope is to tow it overboard a boat for a day, then turn it end for end and tow it another day. If a rope or splice is fuzzy, Ashley recommends rubbing it with a cloud of mail, which in his day was used for cleaning kitchen pans. He also notes that a piece of fine mesh chicken wire will work as well. For cutting rope, Ashley says a sharp hatchet will do the neatest job. He also says that if you aren't sure about your aim or the rope is large, you can lay it across an upturned axe blade and pound it with a piece of firewood. Ashley says that a smoother knot, which requires more skill to tie, can be attained by dipping the strands of the rope for a few moments in hot water and then twisting up the strands tightly and attaching them to a board to let them dry while under tension. If the strands of a knot are to be canvas covered, which Ashley says is usual with multi-strand button knots, you should first scrape the tips to a point and then marl tightly with a fine, soft, twisted linen twine. To avoid twisting and kinking of your rope when tucking a long piece, Ashley recommends tucking a loop instead of the end directly. For an elaborate multi-strand stopper or lanyard knot, Ashley says that after tying, but before working up the knot, to lay the ends up and stop them together to help prevent the knot from coming undone and to keep the ends well centered. For larger knots, in which the lead is to be followed 2 or more times, Ashley says to middle your rope and tie the knot with 1/2. The other half should be used later when doubling the knot. For correcting an error in a knot or sinnet after it has been tied, Ashley recommends using a clue of a different color and size than the material of the knot. He says to take the clue and start at a point beyond the error and lay it in correctly, passing the error and continuing out to the end of the erring strand. Once this is done, remove the strand that is in error and lay it in correctly, parallel to the clue. Entries 128 and 129 talk about the diagrams Ashley uses in his book for tying elaborate knots. When we get to these knots, I may just directly tie the knot without the diagram, or I may show the diagram if it will be beneficial to those of you watching. With these diagrams, the working end of the rope is indicated by an arrowhead and a standing end with a feather. Small circles indicate where 2 leads cross each other, and the working end is always tucked under the other part. Knots with the regular over 1 and under 1 sequence have sequence numbers. Entry 129 shows how the rope should be crossed at a point with a circle from the diagram. After tying a knot, it will need to be worked or drawn up into its proper shape. Ashley notes how a pricker, bodkin, or stiletto is the most practical tool for working a knot. For a very tight knot, a pair of pliers can be used to finish it off. To help with threading rope when tying an elaborate knot with small material, Ashley says to scrape the end to a point and saturate it with Duco cement, which is a type of glue, then twist it and let it dry. Ashley also says to add Duco cement to a squared-off end of braided material to prevent fraying. To wind cord into a ball, first take a few turns around your hand, wad them up by twisting into a figure 8, and then put the ends together. Wind up by rotating the ball. To wind kite string or wet string, Ashley says the best method is to use S-turns and pivot the stick right and left. To uncoil large or wire rope, place the coil on its side and unroll. For new running rigging on board ship, Ashley says the end of the rope is drawn from the center of the coil, and the rope should come out counterclockwise. Entry 139 discusses how kinks are removed from new whale line by making large successive left-hand coils and drawing up the lower end each time throughout the center of the coil. Ashley says the common way of taking out kinks and excess twist from the end of a line is to twirl or spin it at a distance from the end, working toward the end. To untangle a snarl, loosen all jams or knots and open a hole through the mast at the point where the longest end leaves the snarl. Continue to roll or wind the end out through the center as you would a sock. Keep the snarl open and loose and don't pull on the end. Let it unfold itself. To break twine or small cord, Ashley says to lay your finger across the standing part and twist your finger to wrap the cord around. Hold the cord firmly and jerk the cord with the other hand. To break a heavy cord or string, take a turn of the cord around the hand, move the hand so the cord is twisted in the front, and wind the standing part several times around the fingers. Then jerk the cord. To lay up the opened end of a 3-strand rope, the 2 strands should be twisted simultaneously to the right, and at the same time, the right strand should be laid over the left. When the ends are reached, half knot them together. And repeat the process with the last strand. To lay up the opened end of a 4-strand rope, lay up each pair as you would with a 3-strand rope, and then lay the 2 pairs together. If only a short piece of rope is opened, twist any strand a half turn to the right, then lay it to the left across the rope. Repeat with each strand. To secure the end after winding up a hank or ball, use a loop buttoner and put it through the center of the ball. Thread the end through and pull it back through the ball. A less secure way to tuck the end in is to stick it under the last few turns. This concludes all the entries in Chapter 1 of the Ashley Book of Knots. In the next video, we will start looking into Chapter 2.